me. I know I've been quiet for a minute, but I'm back on my business. If you see me, don't trip, just excuse me. Wrong if I do, wrong if I don't. That's why I do me no matter what, so excuse me. Lie if I do, lie if I don't. The proof is in the story, take a seat and excuse me. The crash came when the cash came. Spend it before you get it like those rookies all on draft day. For the love like it's match game. Hit the ground running, really do it for my last name. They act different when the facts change. I'm not with the tip for tag games. In my own league, I don't chase game. In my own league, I don't hang with lanes. I know I've been quiet for a minute. I've been grinding, still in it. I've been counting these digits. Excuse me. I know I've been quiet for a minute, but I'm back on my business. If you see me, don't trip, just excuse me. Wrong if I do, wrong if I don't. That's why I do me no matter what, so excuse me. Lie if I do, lie if I don't. The proof is in the story, take a seat and excuse me. Now how could that be? Talking about who can be talking about me. Feeling like Stretch where I got all this reach. Feeling too blessed when I step on these beats. Now how could that be? I could beat the pressure, I could beat the 2-3. Jab, jab, hook, then I duck and I weave. It was never you, it was me versus me. I know I've been quiet for a minute. I've been grinding, still in it. I've been counting these digits. Excuse me. I know I've been quiet for a minute, but I'm back on my business. If you see me, don't trip, just excuse me. Wrong if I do, wrong if I don't. That's why I do me no matter what, so excuse me. Lie if I do, lie if I don't. The proof is in the story, take a seat and excuse me. Better up, get some. Swinging for the fences, I might leave it in the sun. Every pitch a home run. Stack a couple tickets just to leave it to my son. Take it back while I begun. Small city kid, couldn't dream a bigger one. A marathon, never run. Check the scoreboard, how I'm feeling like I won. I know I've been quiet for a minute. I've been grinding, still in it. I've been counting these digits. Excuse me. I know I've been quiet for a minute, but I'm back on my business. If you see me, don't trip, just excuse me. Wrong if I do, wrong if I don't. That's why I do me no matter what, so excuse me. Lie if I do, lie if I don't. The proof is in the story, take a seat and excuse me.
What do you got? Ringside seats doing ethnic cleansing.
And what up, what up, what up? Good evening, everyone. Salute to everyone. Good evening. What is going on? Welcome to everybody. Happy Wednesday and hump day to everybody. Just getting a little groove on there. Love it. Shout out to BMU there. Love the intro as I do every week. So it is good to be with you guys today, and thanks for coming by. Shout out to everyone. I'm going to go ahead and see who is in the sanctuary today. And first up, we have Lala Unapologetically Divine Libra. Thank you for showing up today. Appreciate you. And we have Milani. Thank you for being here. All right. A-team as usual. Good evening to you, dear. All right. And that is all that we have for the moment. So, short crowd for the evening. Up, we got Braxton. Good to see you, sir. All right. Thank you for being here at the moment. All right. Hey, I am a little flummoxed today. There's a lot going on. I'm just going to say. And I'm going to be very honest with you and very raw. I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to bring this topic up today, because normally when we talk about the battles of men and women, not just black women, not just black men, not just white women, not just white men, but just men and women in general, people normally, what's going on, Black Hawk? Good to see you, sir. Salute to you. I assume, I'm sorry, I apologize. I actually don't know. So just salute to you. I apologize. Normally, people normally start in the middle, all right, and kind of just branch around and shoot around and kind of just, shoot different targets when it comes to these topics. And I kind of want to start from the beginning of where I think issues might be, all right, and work my way towards a focal point, societally speaking. Okay. So I'm actually going to present something to you from a different perspective. All right. So, because last week I discussed about accountability, and I kind of presented a mindset where I kind of shot some jabs, hit some elbows, hit some ribs on both men and women's side, not just black women, not just black men, not just white women, not just white men, everybody. Okay. Because we all, to some degree, have acquiesced to some type of social engineering, societal engineering to some degree. And we all have to take a look at, take an approach of hindsight 2020 to some degree. Okay. To understand where we were, what we allowed, what we have allowed ourselves to be subjected to, and kind of sort of what we have allowed society to alter our own personal perspectives, to change personally. All right. And how we allowed it to change how we view each other and view ourselves. Okay. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do tonight, and as people start to kind of sort of filter in, the reason why I started with accountability is because every subject I talk about with this series is going to take some accountability. It's going to take some acknowledgement. It's going to take some reflection and some inward looking. Okay. So we can't do any of this without some accountability on all of our parts. All right. So with that said, I'm going to ask everybody, okay? Look me here. I'm going to ask everybody, just for the moment, to remove your melanin. Pretend there is no melanin, all right? And just view society as if we're just men and women. Pause for effect. I'm going to ask it again. Remove the melanin and just imagine, just for the moment, just to get this lesson, that you are just man, just woman, just male, just female. Okay? Even though the video I'm going to show you, because I'm going to tell you something, it's very hard for me to find the topic of tonight. It's very hard for me to find information that isn't targeted for Black society or Black culture or Black communities. But if you listen very closely, for the love of God, please listen. You're going to hear the underlying tone. You're going to hear what's kind of there, but it's there in subtext. Okay. Now, with that being said, if you didn't hear me in my request about removing the melanin, then I'll say it a different way. The Martin Luther King podium, I Have a Dream speech podium, let's remove that. All right. And if you're on the Malcolm X side, where everything has to be done by any means necessary, okay, let's remove that as well. Okay. Because the point of tonight, and the point of this series, rather, is men and women. And then we'll put the melanin back on for the lesson. Okay. All right. So good to see you, sir. All right. As people start to filter in. So just in case you didn't hear my request, pretend for the moment that you can remove the melanin in order to get the lesson. Okay. We are men and women for the battle of the sexes. It's your fault. We are here, right? Check it out.
Humanizing elements in the welfare system that we are concerned about removing. Ultimately, we are concerned about a guaranteed annual income. And the other thing I think it is very necessary to say is that everybody's on welfare in this country. And when it comes to Black people and poor people, we just call it something else. When it's for white people and rich, we call it subsidies.
It's no secret, fatherless households are more common in the Black community. A survey from the American Consensus Institution revealed that 67% of Black children under 18 in the US live in homes without fathers. This is a stark contrast to white children, as only 24% of them live in fatherless homes. But it wasn't always like that. The Black families survived generations of open racism, widespread poverty, and slavery. They lived through segregation and violence, and strong family bonds used to be the norm.
As of 1960, 2/3 of all Black American children were living with both parents. That declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1995.
Okay, now I'm going to pause it there for a second. I did that on purpose. All right, so now that I got you a little bit introed in here, I have a theory that at one point, we as a society were not as divided as we once were as it relates to the battle of the sexes. We didn't look at each other between men and women. Again, remove the melanin just for a second. We were not as contentious with each other. The relationship between men and women wasn't as tempestuous. Okay, it wasn't as contentious as it now is. Okay, a Republican House of Representative mentioned something, and it said that we as Black people, men and women, we were more unified as men and women around a certain time in history, unfortunately around Jim Crow time frame. And that sent Democrats just haywire, because how dare someone say something positive around, what was it, 1861, between 1861 and 1968. Okay. Now, hold your pitchforks just for a second, because what you just heard was someone saying roughly the same thing, was that men and women within our little cultures, regardless of race, regardless of what was happening between the racial communities, I'm talking about men and women in general, amongst each other, we didn't see each other as enemies. We didn't see each other as something to battle against. Why? Because we had something called, colloquially, we had something called the nuclear family. We were more unified. We had a kind of a unified front, if you will. Women didn't see men as, no good, ain't shit, individuals. And men didn't see women as, chicken heads and heifers and so on and so forth. We didn't see that as so raw and upfront as we now see it today. Okay. Even in the white community, okay, it was more unified than what we currently see it today. Okay, I think we could all agree that you can basically scroll on any social media platform and you're going to find where there's a man and or a woman complaining about the opposite. The problem with men, the problem with women. It is a social dynamic that wasn't as prevalent in the social spheres within the cultures back in that time frame. Why? Because at that point in time, there was a nuclearized kind of sort of unit where men and women didn't see each other as enemies or something to battle. Okay. All right. Now, again, hold the pitchforks, because I understand that there was a racial issue of a high magnitude around that time frame. And what I'm going to present to you is to listen for this concept that America, around that time frame, the powers that be started to realize something that it needed. That just before all of Jim Crow happened, and what the feminist movement happened around 1832, in between 1832, 1861, just before that, we had what? Well, before that, you had World War I, World War II. You had the issue of, you had depressions, you had the drafts, so on and so forth. And you had the industrial age before that. You had a situation where the powers that be started to kind of need something. It needed workers. So I want you guys to kind of think of something a little bit more zoomed out. Okay. The powers that be, and you guys can fill in the blank of what the powers that be really means. Okay. The powers that be does care about race. So what I'm going to present to you is not saying that the powers that be doesn't care about race, because they do. But money trumps all when it comes to race. And it requires a care and a stark concern about one other thing. And it starts to care about one other thing, and it's called class. Class. The powers that be will start to separate their own distinction from their own people. Okay. So what ended up happening is that you start to have a need for a decline. There started to be a decline of population to some degree, or workers in this case. And so then what happens? You need more workers. And what is an untapped potential or untapped population of workers? I ask a question. What is an untapped, or at that point in time, who was an untapped population of workers around the time when you had a draft, you have the war on drugs, you had mass incarceration? Who was a untapped source or population of workers? Someone says prisoners. There we go. Ding, 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 ding. A team. Perfect. Women. Remember, I said the feminist movement was just before. 1832 was the start of the feminist movement. Well, the women were protected in the nuclear family. So again, take away the melanin just for a second. The powers that be had to stop worrying about race for the moment. The race was still there, okay? Race compounded the issue. Because you're going to hear, again, listen very closely in the video I'm going to show you. You're going to hear that things affected everybody in society. But because of race, it affected us a lot more. But the powers that be didn't care who it affected. What they wanted was a bifurcation, basically a dissemination of, just a disintegration of the nuclear family to break apart whoever was willing to break apart the nuclear family. Using the feminist movement to do what? Remove the man, support the woman, and then to do what? Give access to everything that was normally charged to the man. Give that also to the woman to do what? My theory is to tap into the untapped potential, the untapped population, the workforce that would be the women as well. My thought process is, why else would you develop the Housing Act of 1937? Why else would you develop the Social Security Act of 1935? Why else would you do the Aid to Dependent Children Act as well? Why else would you do Medicare and Affordable Care Act, which was enveloped under the Social Security Act of 1935? Why else would you do that? Why else would you do other types of entitlement like SNAP, WIC, DSNAP, CHIP, SSI? Why else would you do any of these things? Why else would you do the man of the house rule? Yeah. It was about separating and dividing classes of people. So at the same time you had race, you had class coming in, joining together. And now even within the white population, you had classes of white people. Powers that be didn't really care about keeping X amount of white people within the higher rungs of the higher class and higher echelon of white people. They didn't care. They didn't care about putting white people in the rung of class of people as peasants before they got here. Makes you think they would care about doing it when they got here and got settled. We were just collateral damage. So that's my theory, in that race was a compounding effect, but the true target was everybody in order to provide a new type of slavery, but slavery for everybody. And the end goal turned out to be a way of changing our mindset towards creating a battle, or creating a mindset of looking towards our men or our women a different way. And after you see this, you might believe that it actually worked.
So it's not the legacy of slavery that destroys the African American family.
It's the legacy of the welfare state.
Between 1890 and 1950, the marriage rate was much higher among black women than white women. A fraction of black children lived in homes without their fathers. But everything changed with the expansion of the welfare state. It divided the household and created a dependency on welfare. This kind of reminds me of what President Reagan said.
I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
So, what happened? What's the mechanism? Here is a detailed look at how the welfare state played a role in the dissolving of the family structure over the years. People say that the breakdown of traditional family units, family structures, is a byproduct of Black poverty, not just because there is no man to support the family financially, but also because women tend to earn less than men on average. Of course, the connection between the two is there, but it goes deeper than that. Welfare was a mean little business. It was designed to get people by in a pinch. Public assistance programs, like welfare entitlements, have been a part of American culture since the 1940s. Unfortunately, like in many other aspects of government institutions, Black Americans were left out. In time, Black people could also get financial support.
Now, listen to that closely. Black Americans were left out. So these things were actually meant not for Black Americans. These things were meant for white Americans. Black Americans fought for it. Check it out.
But it wasn't easy. Mothers who applied for checks had to let social workers inspect their homes to see if their conditions were suitable for welfare. These workers also had to make sure no man was living in the house. But even if they qualified for support, the amount they received was meager and not enough to build a stable life. In the early 1960s, welfare was not yet common, even in the most impoverished Black communities. In the decade that followed, the number of Black people on welfare went up by 169%. They further increased by 30% from 1970 to 1975. In 1972, New York City, almost 1 out of every 6 residents was on welfare. A major portion of these households were Black. Although Black people were only around 1/10 of all Americans, they made up almost 50% of all welfare recipients by the late 70s.
Okay, now what I want to do is I want to go back.
Welfare. A major portion of these households were Black, although Black people were only around 1/10.
Now, I'm going to bring that up just a little bit. Now, take a look at this. The 1970s, white people were 73%. Okay, so relative to that, U.S. population, this is how many people relative as far as population wise, right? Check it out.
Of all Americans, they made up almost 50% of all welfare recipients by the
Look at these numbers. All right.
The late 70s. A recent UNICEF report showed that many children under 18 in America struggle financially, and African American children are nearly 4 times more likely to be in poverty than white children. Though the number of families receiving cash assistance has decreased since 1996, child poverty rates for Black children in the US remain high. This outcome is not by accident. I studied the evolution of social welfare policies in the US from the New Deal to the 1996 reforms and found that these policies have been discriminatory from the start. And a lot of people can confess to that. This led many Black families to fall into cultural and economic ruin. In a short period, healthy Black people started relying on government assistance to achieve some level of normalcy. But within the city slums, that normalcy was impossible to get. Black children barely knew their fathers, and most were raised by unemployed and unmarried mothers stuck in a cycle of poverty and modest paychecks. This marked a significant shift in Black American history. The consequences were severe for the next generation. Let's start with the Social Security Act of 1935. It was introduced during Franklin Roosevelt's administration. It was designed to create the safety net in the country, safeguarding families from losing their income. It was viewed as a significant part of New Deal reform and paved the way for federal protections in the future, such as the Affordable Care Act and Medicare. This policy had 2 main parts. The first part had social insurance programs that provided financial support to dependents of deceased or incapacitated workers and Social Security for retired older Americans. The second part comprised means-tested public assistance programs, initially known as Aid to Dependent Children and later renamed Aid to Families with Dependent Children. In 1962, under the Kennedy administration, ideally, it was believed that as the overall quality of life in the country improved, more families could support themselves without needing financial assistance from the ADC program. Eventually, the ADC program would become unnecessary and gradually phase out on its own. But this posed a major problem for Black Americans. Like any other component of the New Deal, the origins of the Social Security Act were deeply rooted in racism. During the 1930s and 1940s, Black people had to deal with widespread racial discrimination in the workplace. They held low-paying jobs, often paid in cash and off the books. This made them ineligible for social insurance programs. The ADC program was an extension of state-run programs that supported widowed mothers, but mostly benefited white widows. The states decided eligibility and need, and since the separate but equal doctrine was in place, Blacks were still excluded from fully participating. Jim Crow laws and the separate but equal doctrine led to a system with different services for whites and Blacks. But as we all know by now, they were far from equal. States made efforts to cut down ADC enrollment and costs. They proposed residency requirements to prevent Blacks from the South from qualifying for the program. In 1935,
Okay, so here, a couple times now, we've heard where there were efforts made to keep Black people from getting access to these benefits. So the reason why I keep pointing this out is because a lot of times the narrative contradicts itself to some degree, because the narrative suggests that it was racist, it was racist, it was racist. But if something was truly racist, then it would have been intentionally designed, targeted for Black people to actually get in order for it to be intentionally destructive to the Black community. They didn't want us to actually have access to it, which means that it wasn't intentionally desired or designed to be a racial thing, in the sense that it was designed to be detrimental. Now, maybe it was racist because it wasn't designed to be for us. So maybe that's the discriminatory portion. But then the fact that we fought for it in order to get it, the destructive nature for it, the destruction that it then inexorably created, we ostensibly asked for it because we wanted it. There we go. 18. Thank you. When they throw us the bait, we always think. Okay. There it is.
there was a hearing on a bill, and the NAACP, an organization that fights for civil rights, expressed their concerns. Southern politicians wanted to exclude agricultural and domestic workers from the bill. This meant that many black workers couldn't get the support they needed. This exclusion would particularly affect black sharecroppers and cash tenants, who were already struggling to make ends meet. Even though the NAACP was highly against it, the Social Security Act was approved. That's why 65% of African Americans nationwide were not eligible for benefits, and an even larger percentage of these black families in the South were excluded from the program. In the 1950s and 60s, things got even worse for black families. Welfare checks incentivized single-mother households, and there was one rule that ruined it all: the man-in-the-house rule. Black families have long been the victims of income inequality and bad government policies. The irony, of course, is that conservatives pushed black mothers to break their families to get welfare. Before 1968, many states and administrative agencies created and enforced the man-in-the-house rule. This rule basically meant that if there is a working or healthy man in the house, the government can't help you. And they would go as far as to send welfare workers to visit the homes without warning to check if a man was present. If they found any evidence whatsoever, families lost their welfare benefits. Over the years, the welfare state started dissolving the family structure, slowly but surely.
So this is the part where I start to, I went back and I read the Social Security Act of 1935, Housing Act of 1937. And so here's the thing. How it's written is very innocuous in a way, because it allows for states, especially certain states that are still, how do I put it? That are still discriminatory in a way. It allows for them to make up their own rules to a certain degree. But the way that it's written, it basically states something to the effect of, it allows for councils or boards or tenants basically to inspect properties to see if the tenants still can qualify for set benefits, essentially. And they would assume that a person who is there, they call it the initial family, essentially. That's what they do. And they always say that the initial family that received the benefits, that qualified for the benefits, would have to be that same initial family, right? And so if a man moves there, okay, or some extra person moves there, they can't add to the overall income of the household. And it's assumed that a man moving there, given that a man usually makes more, a substantial amount more than a woman did, especially at that point in time, it would be inferred that he would naturally bring the household income past the ceiling point of what what that family could actually make in order to qualify over that threshold of qualification, essentially, right? The other thing that I saw in the bill was that you couldn't have someone there who was like an ex-con, or someone who did drugs, or whatever the case may be, or someone who was previously evicted. And there was a lot of language in there that was stringently targeted for the mother and not so much for the father. However, there was other language in there in amendments that was able to make room for other type of family members, like step parents, stepfather, fathers, aunts, uncles, parent, guardian type figures like that. But if you're in a state that doesn't necessarily pay attention to, let's say, certain amendments, like if something was announced on the radio and someone says, well, we ain't got a radio type thing, and then you can kind of see how discriminatory type matters can actually still exist, even though amendments to something can actually still occur. So I can see how institutions can utilize or wiggle their way through the language to be able to implement something so heinous. Let's proceed.
A man who can't get a decent job and provide a substantial income suddenly believes that his family is better off without him. So, if a man were to lose his job, he literally...
Wait, I'm going to go back just a little bit because I want the whole sentence to be played without me interrupting. So, here we go.
Created and enforced the man in the house rule. This rule basically meant that if there is a working or healthy man in the house, the government can't help you. And they would go as far as to send welfare workers to visit the homes without warning to check if a man was present. If they found any evidence whatsoever, families lost their welfare benefits. Over the years, the welfare state started dissolving the family structure, slowly but surely. A man who can't get a decent job and provide a substantial income suddenly believes that his family is better off without him. So, if a man were to lose his job, he literally had to leave the house so his children could get government surplus peanut butter, beans, and cheese. On the other hand, if either the woman or the man, or both, were irresponsible, they faced no consequences for their actions. And it was the taxpayers who ended up paying for it. These things aren't exactly designed to keep the marriage intact. They are meant to divide people. The harm done to the children was massive. Many children experienced the hurt from broken families at such a young age. In 1960, just 33% of Black American children didn't live with two parents, but by 1988, that rate went up to 61%. In that time, the proportion of Black children born to single mothers rose from 23% to more than 60%. This is exactly why we can't judge government.
Okay, so right there, I'm just going to make a point in that if we're saying, if we were to reach back ourselves and talk to them with the knowledge that we know now, what would we say to them? Just what would we say? Somebody put it in the chat. What would, if we could vocalize something to those women back then, in the time frame and in the time and moment that they're talking about right then, what would we say to them about the multiple or the increase of birth rates? What would we say to them? I'll wait for it because I would say it, but I need a woman to say it. I'm not seeing a woman saying it, so I'm gonna have to be the one to say it. Because when I say it, I'm gonna show data. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm trying here. It's hard to to ask the questions here. Okay, so repeat the question. All right. So if we could reach back and vocalize some advice to these women relative to what was just stated in the video, what would we tell them? I'll play the part in the video relative to the birth rate. Okay? Hang on. I'll say it again.
Policies.
Right here.
Many children experience the hurt from broken families at such a young age. In 1960, just 33% of Black American children didn't live with two parents, but by 1988, that rate went up to 61%. In that time, the proportion of Black children born to single mothers rose from 23% to more than 60%. This is exactly why.
What would we say to them as advice about the birth rate? What would we tell them to stop doing? Yeah, sure. Don't take the bait, but I'm looking for something else. There we go. Thank you. Stop having kids. Because, yeah, there we go. There we go. Here it is, right there. There it is. Because by that time frame, looking at the date and chronology of things, at that time frame, there was contraception. The Supreme Court had allowed them to have contraception, especially that was a thing at the point in time. Let me show you something really quick. Because even though women could not afford to, mind you, in the time in history that he's talking at this very moment, men had largely basically said, hey, I can't afford to pay for the kids and the home because for some reason the job let me go because of racism. Mind you, racism was still a thing, okay, compounded by class, okay. Education was still an issue because of segregation and other issues and yada yada, so on and so forth, okay. Because remind you, man and woman in the Black community still Black, okay. So that was already an issue. So Black men just said, okay, you know what? The government is going to be able to do more for you than I can. Let's just say, okay? So then that's compounded an issue. Then largely women started figuring out the game. Women start saying, okay, well, guess what? The government's going to be able to provide us food. The government's going to provide us housing. The government's going to be able to provide this, that, so on and so forth, yada, yada. Oh, wait. I like you, man, but here's the deal. The government's going to provide me housing and I can't have a man in the house. I can work, but I can't make any more than just this amount of money in order to ensure that I'm here at this house, at this location. And let's give some benefit of the doubt because maybe the kids are comfortable at a certain school and you don't want to move. You don't have the resources to move. Let's just say. Because I do realize there were on one end, there's women who's just acquiesced and just used to just being comfortable and got complacent. On the other hand, let's just say the father of the children were somewhere else but relatively close, and let's just say women, the woman was right there in the middle between where the child went to school at and where the father of the children was working. Let's just say there was some good women mixed in there. Let's just keep it fair. Whatever the case may be, there wasn't a situation where both the father and the mother said, you know what? Screw the government system. We're going to come together and make it work. No, there was acquiescence. There was complacency. And instead of looking around and saying, what are the others doing? We decided to basically, we as a community didn't look around. We only looked at each other instead of looking around to see what was the larger and bigger effect. What was the biggest picture? An enmity built between men and women because of this. Now, I'm going to show you something that is very damning. This is data. I'm going to can't talk. Going to blow it up a bit here. This is damning data. Poverty status of people by family, relationship, race, and Hispanic origin from 1959 to 2023. Now, this is all races right here. I want to draw your attention because I didn't believe it. And you know what? If I can prove it with data, I'm going to show you. Now, I skipped past the white folks because I want to show you the juxtaposition between Black women All right, so here is Black women, families with female householder with no spouse present. Between 1959 to 1970, you care to look at the percentage? 70%. So the man wasn't lying. That between 59 and 1970, it went from 70, 65, 61, 58, 58, 58, and we stayed consistent. And then there was a drop in 1995. So Black men started to do better in 1995. I'm glad you asked that question. We're going to get there. Because you're going to be floored when I show you. So when the story says that Black men ain't shit, look at what we did. We did better 2001. And look at what we're doing in 2023. Now, here's the problem. When we get to white women, look at what they did in the same time frame. 40% to 28% in the same time frame. I'm going to pause for effect because I want you guys to understand that, yes, it still affected them. But something changed. One thing changed, and I'm not going to deny this, is that other races, they have a cushion because the system is built to protect them. I'm not going to deny that. And of course, they didn't start saying that there was a war on drugs until things started affecting them, of course. Totally understand that. They don't start declaring war on things until they start realizing and start seeing the effects on them. Totally understand that. I am not going to deny that. But I'm going to go back to what Ahmad here said earlier. And I should have started, but I'm going to start now because I'm going to keep coming back to it. When are we going to stop taking the bait? Because it is situations like this right here that has led men and women of all races, but in particular ours, to start seeing each other as a problem. Because of these numbers right here, You have a generation from 59 all the way to 2000s believing that black men, or just men in general, don't want to be around their kids. They ain't shit. Writ large, if you're looking at the percentage. And I could see why looking at these numbers. That's why I titled this the way that I titled it today. It's your fault we're here. I'm sorry, you're the reason we're here. Because men didn't take accountability and responsibility and say, you know what? We're not going to rely on the government. My kids, my responsibility. But women, what happened? Once you guys got the support that was needed from the government, the seed is grown. What happened? Did you turn back to the man and then say, we were good, and now we got enough help that we need. Now we're off to a good start. We can now grow together. Did we get the temporary aid that we needed? No. Why? Because the numbers of women who lead households have increased. And it's all women, not just black women, all women. I can pull up another chart where the number of people in general who lead household with the mindset of, I'm going to rely on the government. And guess what? It's men too. Quiet as it's kept. Yes, I throw punches on both sides. I'm sorry. I can't make it smaller on the phone, dude. You're gonna have to get on the phone, green beans. I mean, you have to get it on a computer. So the point that I'm making is that yes, this all should have been temporary. The aid should have been temporary. But the problem is that we made it a lifestyle. And notice I didn't point a finger and say, women, you made it a lifestyle. I said, we made it a lifestyle. But not only did we make it a lifestyle, what also happened is that we then decided to not only make it a lifestyle, but then we changed our mindset towards each other. Because instead of explaining to the children why a good man might have actually did the best that he could and made an unfortunate decision to say, you know what, let the government take care of you. No, instead of doing that, what ended up happening is children grow up and creating animus towards their fathers. Why? Because the father isn't there. That's natural. I was upset at my father and I didn't even know who the hell he was. Compound that times 2 or 3 generations, and you have 3 or 4 generations of children just pissed off at the father figure, or pissed off at their ain't shit mother for not telling the story, or pissed off at their ain't shit mother for not being there because the father was there. And now we have a cultivated generation who just believes that one parent just ain't shit. And that's what they know, and that's what they teach. And I'm not lying. The data doesn't lie. 58%. That is crazy. Now, I'm not going to deny that there are some economic implications there too. But I have to ask you, aren't there economic implications today? And yet, how many people are still finessing the system today? Getting tax returns and not contributing towards taxes.
But we can't judge government policies based on their ideals, but based on their results. And these results, well, left a ton of households fatherless. I mean, think about it. What would the result have been if this welfare policy had required the opposite of that? That both parents live in the same home and care for their children to receive government assistance.
And this right here is the reason why I said that it was a class agenda. It had nothing to do with race. Because they had an agenda. They wanted to tap into the untouched population of women, which were workers. Think about it. If they could add to the number of workers in the workforce, they can then justify paying everybody less. Think about it.
The welfare state did what slavery couldn't do. It broke families apart, and broken families fuel poverty. The structure of the family can influence the choices children make. For example, boys raised without their fathers are more likely to drop out of school, get violence, use drugs, or go to jail. Girls are more likely to have a child out of wedlock or engage in sexual activities at a very early age. These children are also more prone to mental health problems, which can affect them as adults. A psychology test, detailed in Roy Baumeister and John Tierney's book, Willpower, showed that children from fatherless households were more likely to settle for a small prize straight away. In contrast, children with fathers present were more willing to wait for a bigger prize. Experts from the Northwestern Institute for Policy Research challenged that these effects are primarily due to dangerous neighborhoods or poor schools. They found that the direct effect of family structure itself played a more significant role. As marriage rates declined among the poor and working class in the US, the institution of marriage has remained strong among the wealthier population, with similar rates to those from 50 years ago. At the same time, the decrease in marriage among the working class has led to a significant rise in out-of-wedlock births.
Sorry, I was muted. Mute monster got me. Again, let's repeat that. Among the working class. Again, let's repeat that. Because I told you, it's about class when it comes to the upper echelon of people. They don't care about race. That's why when I say that we say that Trump is racist. Again, people, I have a hard time proving that Trump is racist. I'm gonna be very honest with you. Now, again, I'm a registered Democrat and I voted for Kamala. I have a hard time proving that he's racist. I have an easier time proving that he's a classist. Just being honest. Some of the things he says, you can say, that's a little, you pressing a racist button there. Okay? But classist, all day long. I can point many things that he says that is really honestly classist. Okay? But racist, it's really difficult. Because you can almost take any racist thing he says and say, how much money does that person, those group of people that he's talking about, how much money do they make? You can almost switch it to something that's classist. So, just saying, I know I'm going to get some pitchforks on that one, but I'm being fair, okay? Still don't like the guy. But repeat.
The institution of marriage has remained strong among the wealthier population, with similar rates to those from 50 years ago. At the same time, the decrease in marriage among the working class has led to a significant rise in out-of-wedlock births, often to couples who are living together without being married. This happens because people view marriage as an ideal situation, but feel it is unachievable, yet they still want to have children. In the mid-1980s, the rates of fatherless households dramatically increased. Today, just 44% of Black children live with their fathers. Also, a lot more Black children are born outside of marriage. The rates of such cases went up from 24.5% in 1964 to 70.7% by 1994.
Again, if you can't look at me. If you can't afford the kids, stop having them. If you are not financially able to have the kids, then
Why? 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 Why?
why? Why? Why? Kids don't make shit better. They don't, especially financially. I can't think of a time where, financially speaking, having a child is easy to fund. I can't think of a time. They're financially and fiduciary on a fiduciary note, they are a burden. Stop having children if you cannot afford them. Because the little bundle of joy that oohs and coos, that's so easy and cheap to take care of, at the moment when you can just, feed them a little, that stuff changes. Diapers, I'm still paying for diapers. They are $60 a case. What are we doing? But here's the problem. Government subsidies. It makes it so it's okay. As long as the government comes in and says, I'm here and I'm able to make their life a little easier to have these kids. Because in reality, the government sees births as money. They see births as GDP, future GDP. There we go. Something. Yeah, such a real and important concept. It is. Like, end conversation. Yes. Like, just stop. Stop. I don't get it. It makes my brain itch. I didn't have my first biological until I was in my 30s. And I did some things. It ain't hard. You chose to go that route. 77%? And you eating off government cheese, peanut butter, and stuff. Like, what are we doing? So yes, 50-50 responsibility and accountability for your ass. Absolutely. And the nerve to sit here and have more fingers to point at a man. The nerve of Oprah and the nerve of any of the media, the nerve of any generation of big mamas or whoever the case may be to dog a man out. The nerve. When you are a willing fucking participant, literally. When you know good and damn well you cannot afford those damn kids. The nerve of the men. That if you were going to do that, why would you leave the responsibility of the government to take care of the kids, to be financially responsible? Why? Just why? I play the video. Just
which remains at a similar level today. Many people blame the expansion of welfare programs for the breakdown of black families. Since 1935, people have had access to cash welfare, but this welfare was quite modest and not enough to cover any of the living expenses.
Yeah,
With
no
Johnson's
shit.
Great Society, which began in 1964, welfare benefits became much more generous and controlled. When I mean controlled, I mean crazy. The man in the house rule discouraged marriage because it provided welfare assistance to mothers if no man was living in the house. If a mother married an employed man, even one earning the minimum wage, it jeopardized her financial support. These benefits were huge. The Great Society programs offered a way out for low-income black families. This could be why, in 1964, only 7% of American children were born out of wedlock, compared to the current rate of 40%.
Look at that.
So basically, the government urged mothers to keep fathers out of the home and paid them well for doing so. Shifts in the labor market and deindustrialization greatly impacted job opportunities, especially for low-skilled workers. It hurt both whites and black people, but black communities were the most affected. Here's an example. Imagine a city like Detroit, where the manufacturing industry was the top employer, and many black men held manufacturing jobs. Here, in the 1970s, 56% of black men were in the manufacturing industry, but by 2000, it dropped to 26%. Over the years, technological advancements and economic shifts created a demand for skilled workers in other sectors, like healthcare or technology. These new jobs required a higher level of education and specialized skills. The problem was the lower level of education among black men on average. As jobs increasingly required education beyond high school, black men faced many challenges. This made it harder for them to adapt to the changing job market and find new employment in other industries. White men were better equipped to handle the changing job market. They had higher education and a greater chance of securing well-paid jobs in emerging industries. Then there was the 90s gear change. In the late 1990s, efforts to reform the AFDC program took on more subtle forms of racism. Critics claimed that the program encouraged out-of-wedlock births.
Now, again, this is good information in this video, but one of the things that really pisses me off about all of this is that everything is filtered through a lens of it has to be racism. It really pisses me off. Here's why. Let's go back to our lovely doohickey data. Somebody asked the question, how does it look for other races? Now, I don't know if you guys recall, but I need everyone to confirm. Put a 1 in the chat if you guys are aware that Asian people at one point in our American history, lovely history, okay, our Make America Great Again history, that Asians were put into internment camps in American history. Put a 1 in the chat if you knew that. I'll wait because this is important. Specifically Japanese. Great. Okay. So, particularly brown melanation and yellow melanation, America seems to have a problem with. Okay. Now, pay attention. Asian and Pacific Islander, I don't have too much data for, but I want you to look at how they reacted. In 1987, they had 37%, and look at their trajectory. Whoops. Look at their trajectory. Down, 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 down. For the most part, right? Look at their trajectory. Also, goes up a little bit, but it goes down. Now, you would agree, objectively speaking, you would agree that these programs, because remember, if anyone disagrees with me, bear in mind that I read the bill. It's a boring bill to read. Fuck, is boring. But I get a kick out of it. You would agree that the bills affects everybody across the government. I mean, across the United States when they pass a bill. Okay. Look at how they chose to react against it. Now, the question I then ask is, why is everything first looked at through a racial lens? We have got to be careful about looking at everything just through a racial lens and saying it has to be racist first. Okay? When we do that, we forget that we are part of a citizenry first. And then we forget that there's a bigger picture, or there's a bigger task, or a bigger plot at work. Racism is there. You will not get an argument from me. Racism is there. I see it. I know it's there. I'm not so much of Martin Luther King that the Malcolm X is gone to me. You won't hear that from me. Well, the point that I am trying to make throughout this entire live tonight is that we focused so much on each other and focused so much on the racial aspect of it that it tainted our own views of one another. That we would vilify and eviscerate each other on behalf of the very people that have it out for us. That we would judge, that women would judge a man by the size of his wallet in the same way that the powers that be would relegate us to a class rung of a social ladder. Let that marinate for a second. A man could be a good man, but because he doesn't make enough money, he's not hired for the job of being a good man in your life. In the same way that society will look at a man and say, he's not qualified because he doesn't fit into a social class or a social order because of his net worth. The same way that they redlined us out of certain residential communities, so too will a woman redline a man out of her life simply because he doesn't make enough money. And that is because I believe of a social programming that occurred starting way back after 1968. Now, I'm going to let this play, but if you agree with me, put a 1 in the chat. Let's go.
Irresponsible fatherhood and dependency across generations. During this time, there was a lot of public concern about the cost of welfare programs. Some people believed that the programs contributed to rising taxes and national debt. It tapped into public fears and created a seriously negative perception of people who received welfare. There were a lot of misconceptions and stereotypes about those who lived in poverty. So, the reform bill that was eventually passed replaced the AFDC with TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. The new bill imposed stricter work requirements, expecting single mothers to find work within 2 years of receiving benefits. There was also a 5-year limit on receiving benefits. To promote traditional family values, teenage mothers didn't receive benefits. But that was not all. If a father were to fall behind on child support payments, they could face threats of imprisonment. The bill restricted the use of federally funded TANF for certain groups of immigrants. There were also eligibility limitations on Medicaid, food stamps, and supplementary Social Security income, SSI. These measures were just too harsh. They made it difficult for families in need to get proper financial support. Instead of addressing the root of poverty and creating new employment opportunities, it just punished those who already struggled financially. Well, today, modern problems require new solutions. According to Forbes, the economic status of Black Americans is still far behind compared to white people in terms of stock ownership, net worth, income, home ownership, and other metrics. In the United States, Black workers earn about 30% less than white workers. Almost 50% of Black workers are working in retail, food services, healthcare, and accommodation, and a huge chunk of these workers are doing lower paying services.
Now, I have a point on this to make as well, but I'm going to let it play.
Imagine getting paid more than 40% less than white men for doing the exact same job. If you are a Black woman in the US, this is more likely to happen. In 2020, Black women earned around 58% of what white men earned on average. Similar to Latinas and Native women, Black women face a much more significant pay gap compared to all women. This is because they face both racism and sexism in the workplace. Today, the Social Security program.
Okay. Oh, I was going to let him finish, but I want to dispel something. Because a lot of times people seem to think that there is this huge pay difference between men and women. And I would actually like to beg to differ. Yes, there is a pay difference, but it's not because of discrimination. There's an earnings difference because of what women choose to do. And honestly, it's because of what you guys are good at and what men are good at. Okay? But don't worry, because y'all know I don't say nothing. I know better English. I don't say anything without coming with some data. Here we go. I come ready for y'all. So as of 2023, the male, and this is all women, all men, all right? So if you want to calculate women, for instance, and men, Black women and black men, I can do that as well. I can pull that shortly. But there is now less than a $11,000 difference. Okay. Now, if you want to look at that between 22 and 23, it's slowly creeping up and it's slowly changing. Okay. So, yes, there is a difference. I agree with that. But some of that is because of types of profession. And for those of you who agree with me, thank you. I appreciate it. It sometimes is very difficult to provide a different perspective than what we've been socially engineered to actually believe. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So yes, there is a pay difference, or not pay difference, but an earnings difference or a profit difference. But it's relative to what women typically do and relative to what men typically do. Now, as far as the difference between white people and Black people, well, here's the thing. It goes back to that whole accountability thing. I'm going to say something, and if you agree with it, put a 1 in the chat. And if you disagree with it, put a 2. Here's my thought. We in the Black community do not necessarily champion academia. In schools, we don't necessarily promote and standardize and pedestalize Black education, Black smartness, new word, and Black intuitiveness when we're young. We tend to make fun of it. We tend to ostracize it. We tend to excoriate it. If a Black kid comes up and talks with verb noun agreement in the way that I talk, that kid is told that he's talking white. He's not talking with ebonics. He's not talking like everyone else around him, around her. when a kid grows up, black kid grows up, and you think that he or she has a future, especially if the child is a male, your first thought isn't, oh, he could be a doctor or he could be a lawyer. Your first thought is, oh, he's gonna be a basketball player. And then usually the plan B is usually something academic. Come on, somebody. We don't champion education. So some of the reasons why we don't get into these fields that are largely profitable is because we don't necessarily push it and promote it. We don't say to our children first that they could be something other than someone who can throw a ball that's made of leather pigskin, or some other substance. I'm just saying. That's because schools are not properly invested in. I could agree with that. Two things can be true at the same time. But how much pressure do we put on the schools? The schools are there to basically provide incentive and to lead a horse to water. Who is required to make that horse drink the water? Our culture champions bullshit. Our culture says it's fine to be cool. It's fine to be doing dumb shit. Our culture says that it's more important to focus on things that don't matter as opposed to speaking with verb, noun, fucking agreement. Only reason why I'm saying this is because this is my experience as a light-skinned black male who didn't fit into the white community and half-ass fit into the black community. I wasn't black enough for the black community. I wasn't white enough for the white community. So everything can't just because the world is racist. I agree. The world is racist. But let's be honest. How many times are we going into our kids' portals for their school and checking to make sure that their grades are right? Or are we focusing more on making sure that we're at the basketball games, the football games? Are we more concerned about the scholarships to the schools on sports? Are we more concerned about what leads to the scholarships, which are the grades? So some of the reasons why we struggle with education is because we don't make it a priority. It only becomes a priority after we realize that Johnny can't throw a fucking ball. I'm done.
Backbone for many black families. It protects them through disability, retirement, or death. The program is crucial because African Americans often lack financial resources and have higher disability rates. The program is meant to help those who earn low income get benefits. Those who heavily rely on Social Security are older Black people with lower lifetime earnings and fewer pension benefits. For example, in 2017, 35% of married and 58% of unmarried
I hope what
older
you're saying
Black
is
people
correct, Braxton.
received 90% or more of their income from Social Security. Despite its importance, Black Americans still benefit less overall from the program because of the ongoing pay disparities and shorter life expectancies. These factors result in lower lifetime earnings and, in turn, reduce the total benefits received from Social Security. In 2005, President George W. Bush wanted to make some changes and planned to privatize the program. But the NAACP responded with a nationwide campaign called SOS, Save Our Social Security, and partnered with the Congressional Black to keep the program safe. It worked. Social Security is still an important support system for countless families. Unfortunately, our country has made very few efforts to reduce the disparities in wealth and income between Black and white households. Despite laws against pay discrimination, Black men earn 83 cents and Black women earn 62 cents for every dollar earned by white men. Also, practices like redlining or housing discrimination have made it nearly impossible or much less profitable for Black families to own homes. These structural barriers create fewer opportunities for Black people to accumulate wealth and save for retirement. When the pandemic hit, Social Security became even more critical. Many Black adults lost jobs, and many small businesses were forced to close. The coronavirus made it very difficult to keep up with mortgage or rental payments. The thing is, today, more Black Americans are more likely to enter a church to go to a funeral than to celebrate a wedding. Fatherless homes, declining marriage rates, and high divorce rates are challenging the Black community to the core. Imagine as a young child living in poverty with a single mother in a poor and drug-infested neighborhood. Over the years, you would have witnessed how this would impact your chances of success, like finishing high school and getting a good job. Because of this, many Black children are raised with little expectations or a sense of hope. Now, some might argue that it takes a village to raise a kid, but in reality, the urban public housing village is drenched in toxic influences like violence, drugs, and bad role models. And in that village, fatherless boys are left alone to figure out what it takes to be a man. So, where do they look? To one another. And in many cases, they turn to gangs and the streets. Girls' lives, too, are deeply damaged in fatherless households. Without a father figure, young girls can experience psychological and emotional challenges. They can have lower self-esteem and struggle to form healthy relationships with men. Teen pregnancy is a common problem. They can also struggle with economic hardships and poor academic performance. For things to change, we need to acknowledge that the absence of Black men is damaging countless households. To fill this void, it is essential to reunite fathers with their children, but also to teach the younger generation the value of family structures. But this is something that will take time and a lot of effort. All in all, the US welfare system is a clear reflection of its economic policies and the nation's long history of racism. From the very beginning, the policy excluded Black Americans who were already struggling financially. The man in the house rule only made things worse, which greatly impacted Black households. The expansion of welfare led to a decrease in fathers' involvement in raising their children, leaving mothers to struggle alone in jobless poverty. This created a new reality for poor Blacks, where work became optional, fathers were rare, and dysfunction became common. The lack of family loyalty and work ethic led to a new oppositional racial outlook among young Black males who often resorted to crime. Now, years later, the impact of the rule can still be felt. A lot of Black children have grown up without a father, and they can easily go astray. The situation is hard for overworked and exhausted single mothers. The more children they had, the harder it was to get a job. I just want to point out the brutal reality that led to such circumstances. The welfare culture discouraged individual responsibility. It pushed people to make hard choices, which damaged their families and put everyone.
I'm muted again. Sorry. So that's the end of that one. So much to say at the end of that one, because it seems like what he was saying basically is that everyone is a victim of their own circumstances. And while I want to be able to say yes, because of racist issues within the society, which led to economic struggles due to racial issues within the vocational fields, led to a lot of men being laid off or underpaid or whatever the case may be, which is very true. Someone becoming a single mother, that's not the government's fault. Someone being put into an economic situation that is a direct result of, I'm going to say it, piss poor planning. That's not the government's fault. Some of that we have to take accountability and responsibility for. And the degradation of our own community because we wanted to benefit from the benefits that was being provided by the government. I don't deny that the benefits, if they were going to be provided to everybody, they should have been provided for everybody. If you're going to do something for some, you should do something for all. I don't disagree with that. But where I have a problem is the father of your children is struggling. Ladies, where was the helping hand or the thought process of reuniting to the father of the children? There was a choice that was made as a community. And there was also a choice made in the community to look at each other and see each other not as one, but see each other as enemies. One thing my wife always said that I always appreciate about her is that whatever I got, we got. So where was that mentality? It's because I think that we started to lose sight of that because of the social engineering. So I'm going to play this really quick. Here's an excerpt from the guy who coined the term of the welfare state.
Welcome to Documentary Pulse with Mo. Today we will be talking about how the welfare state ruined black families. A survey from the American Consensus Institution revealed that 67% of black children under 18 in the U.S. live in homes without fathers. This is in stark contrast to white children, as only 24% of them live in fatherless homes. However, it wasn't always like this. Black families survived generations of open racism, widespread poverty, and slavery. They lived through segregation, violence, and strong family bonds used to be the norm. As of 1960, 2/3 of all black American children were living with both parents. This declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1995. Therefore, it's not the legacy of slavery that destroys African Americans. It's the legacy of the ill welfare state. Between 1890 and 1950, the marriage rate was much higher among black women than white women. Only a fraction of black children lived in homes without their fathers. However, everything changed with the expansion of the welfare state. It divided households and created a dependence on welfare among the young. Here, Thomas Sowell talks about this issue.
All right, crime. And in this case, you're writing not only about African Americans, but about low-income people generally. In the United States, murder rates, rates of infection with venereal diseases, and rates of teenage pregnancies were among the social pathologies whose steep declines were suddenly reversed in the 1960s. Nowhere was rampant violence and other social pathology as common among low-income people in the first half of the 20th century, when they were more deprived, as in the second half, when the welfare state had made them better off in material terms, close quote. Again, it's not the intention of anybody enacting the welfare state to cause increases in violence, but it happened.
Yes.
What was the disconnect between intentions and what emerged?
Oh heavens! They misdiagnosed the causes of things, and therefore they misdiagnosed the effect to expect. For example, in the case of venereal diseases, sex education was introduced on a mass basis in the 1960s, and when the arguments for doing it were one, to reduce the level of venereal diseases and of teenage unwanted pregnancies. And both those things had been going down on their own. That is, and by 1960, the rate of infection for venereal diseases was something like half of what it was in 1950. And then they bring in the sex education, and it turns around and shoots up. Among blacks, the homicide rates among black males declined by 18% in the 1940s, by 22% in the 1950s, and then skyrocketed in the 1960s, wiping out all that progress. And they had a different view of the world, and their view just did not meet the test of time.
One more instance of this kind of retrogression, the family. Again, discrimination and disparities. As of 1960, this one, I just find this one heartbreaking. As of 1960, 2/3 of all Black American children were living with both parents. That declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1995. Among Black families in poverty, 85% of the children had no father present, close quote. So it's not the legacy of slavery that destroys the African American family.
It's the legacy of the welfare state.
And by the way, we see illegitimacy rates rising among everybody.
Yeah, and in other countries.
And
you know,
Look at there.
the very same thing in England.
So now, check it out. It's not just happening here in the US. It seems as though no matter where you go, where there is welfare provided or some sort of subsidy, and just imagine subsidy, just picture subsidy just being a situation where it's providing an out or a caveat for a single parent, usually, hold your pitchfork, ladies, usually women, a way to take care of a child or children without the need of a partner, or in this case, a husband or man, or whatever the case may be. Okay? Which, by these stats and by these things, I have to ask the question, is it even possible to really raise a child on your own? I would posit that it's not. By the sheer number of women or just people in general, men and women, going to court for a child support, and by SNAP, WIC, DSNAP, CHIP, SSI, all these different entitlement programs, it paints a picture to me that no one who is either middle class or lower class, working class people can actually raise a child on a fiduciary level on their own without assistance. So I need to dispel something really quick, that nobody can raise a child on their own. Nobody can. And not financially. Maybe a rich person can, but even that person needs a nanny. The point that I'm making here is that on a societal level, welfare is affecting not just America and affecting white people, black people, whatever. Take color out of it. It's not just a racial issue. Because remember, I told you that these programs were not designed for us. We fought to inject this poison into our society, into our community. And then we allowed for it to completely disintegrate everything about us, for the most part. But it's the way of saying, but these programs basically all they do for the most part, if you allow it, and here's the point I really want to make before I press play, is that they're there to help. I don't disagree with their existence, but they're designed to be temporary. The problem is you have people who grows dependent on them. Complacent. And then decide to just stick around and stay there and say, well, as long as I'm here getting this, I don't have to do anything else. And then when someone comes around and say there's a working requirement and you have to prove that you're working because you can't stay on this program forever, then the solution is to have more babies, or the solution is to find a way to do something, vote for someone who doesn't want, working requirements, or something to basically ensure that you're able to continue to get that money, to remain in a position that you're in, to be able to basically do the bare minimum. And here's the thing, those of you who are watching now or who will watch this, if the shoe does not fit, then don't put it on. But if the shoe does fit, lace that motherfucker up and let's take a walk.
And what's the mechanism? Why does the welfare state dissolve the family structure?
For one thing, it makes it unnecessary for fathers to support their offspring. And in fact, it makes it counterproductive in many cases. A very poor man who might be able to support his family realizes his family will be better off without him. But on the other hand, someone who's strictly irresponsible, either the man or the woman or both, now pays no price for being irresponsible. The taxpayers pay the price. And actually the harm done to the taxpayers, which is serious, still is not comparable to the harm done to the families, especially the children.
To the kids.
Yeah. Moynihan was excoriated for pointing this out.
1965,
the
Moynihan Report. That's right, yes. The Moynihan Report.
People that took this as a way of putting down blacks. What they don't understand was that, one, Moynihan was a scholar who knew that his own group, the Irish Americans, had that very same problem at the beginning of the 20th century. And more importantly, Moynihan's own father deserted the family when he was 10 years old.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He and his brother were out shining shoes in Times Square and Central Park to try to bring in a few pennies to help keep the house going. And so where they'd been living in this wonderful suburban area, suddenly they were in a very rough neighborhood and they were shining shoes in Times Square to try to make ends meet. And so he understood that this was one heck of a problem that people should be warned about. And he was simply excoriated.
All right. So the reason why I played him is because he was referenced in the other clip. So I did put a link in the chat for people to come up and either refute or provide context. However, before I do that, I do have to apologize really quick. I'm going to take a moment, take a little bit of a break, give you guys a little bit of backdrop here. My wife is out of town at the very moment, and I am doing daddy daycare, and my son is screaming at the very moment. So give me 1 second. I'm going to take a little bit of a breather so I can go tend to him. 1 second. And give me one moment. I'll be right back. In the meantime, if you guys want to join the panel, feel free to pop up. And if not, I will give my final thoughts, and I would give a dissertation for the second and let you guys go for the evening. But I appreciate your patience. Give me one moment. Okay.
All work, no pleasure. I ain't here to make friends, big stepper. Hey, Bad guy, Heath Ledger. Ready for whatever, I'll be front and center. Don't fly too close to the sun, your body chopped up by propellers. Came in arrogant, but left out in a stretcher. Fuck the comparison, y'all know y'all couldn't replicate it. Chilling in the desert, I'm good under pressure. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. This a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. From the ground with me to the clouds, never coming down. That's the crown on me, wear it proud, show 'em what we bout. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. Said this a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. From the ground with me to the clouds, never coming down. That's the crown on me, wear it proud. Fuck what they was talking about. All work, no pleasure. I ain't here to make friends, big stepper. Hey, bad guy, Heath Ledger. Ready for whatever, I'll be front and center. Quick to sever, however, whoever. Raining from above, we shooting down through your umbrella. Ay, getting fed up, nothing you could tell us. Snapping every shot I take, just wait till it develops. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. This a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. On the ground with me to the clouds, never coming down. That's the crown on me, wear it proud, show 'em what we bout. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. Said this a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. From the ground with me to the clouds, never coming down. That's the crown on me, wear it proud, fuck what they was talking about. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. From the ground with me to the clouds, never coming down. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. Said this a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. From the ground with me to the clouds, never coming down. That's the crown on me, wear it proud, fuck what they was talking about.
All right. Apologies, everybody. All right. Dad duties definitely come first. And he is okay. All right. Just want to make sure he is good to go. All right. So I appreciate everyone sticking around. Definitely. So what I wanted to do basically is to give my final thoughts. I don't see anyone in the back, and that's okay. I appreciate everyone sticking around, and I appreciate everyone commenting. Thank you. I think it's Gikana, I believe, or Zkana corner, or Melissa. Thank you for your comments and the support. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone. Yes, intermission. Yes, dad duty calls. All right. But yes, so for the most part, appreciate the feedback for sure. Everyone here, for the most part, has their own take on the different issues in society. Some take a more of a political approach. Some people, jab with knives. Some people take a more of a softer approach. But we all here on the BMU network, we definitely, bring our different flavor, our different spice, to the stew here. Okay. And some of us, we mix it with dynamite, and others we are more we are more finite with how we do it. All right, but we all have something to bring to the table, and hopefully everyone can basically eat from it and get something nutritious to chew on and think from it. Okay, so I appreciate it, and as far as my final thoughts on everything, I am going to continue the series. What I want to get from this basically is men and women in general. What I want to do is point out where I think all of this basically started. We at one point did not see each other as enemies. We were more unified. And I didn't want to start off the series, as I mentioned earlier. I didn't want to start off just talking about the regular things like child support and sex, and although we will get to those things in this series of Battle of the Sexes, we will get to those things. But I don't think it does anyone any good to just talk about the problems without focusing on the why. Where did it come from? At least from my perspective, I think this right here, what I presented to you tonight, as best as I could, because I couldn't find any information or any videos or anything as to really how it affected white people. nor could I find anything about how the welfare state just affected America in general. It was always tangentially focused and specifically focused on the Black people. And I'm like, well, it had to have affected everybody. So I had to listen to underlying subcutaneous texts to find out and glean information for it to be able to present to you and say it actually affected everybody. I had to add color to it. And I think oftentimes we focus so much on how it affects us in one way that we don't pay attention to the bigger picture. And then we allow something to grotesquely affect us in an inextricable way, to a point where we ostensibly end up in a different position, in a different island somewhere, economically, socioeconomically, geopolitically. And then we look up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, and we have no idea how we got here. And then we look at the other party, men look at women and women look at men and say, you're the reason we're here. And then the other side snaps and says, how you figure, right? You're the one that's getting us pregnant and leaving us. And the men are saying, well, you're the one that basically accepted all this shit, not realizing we're talking past each other, and the powers that be essentially created this mess. And neither one of us are aware that back in the day, we begged for this mess. We apparently wanted it. And it wasn't meant for us. We think that everything is filtered through some sort of lens of racism, and we walk around as if we are constantly victims. We've got to stop that. Because while I understand that we are walking around constantly Black all the time, we are also constantly an American all the time too. And the powers that be are looking at our class, how much money we make, and our skin tone. So if they're looking at us that way, we need to be aware and move about the same way that they're looking at us too. They're passing policies that affect us more than just our skin tone. When I read the Social Security Act of 1935 and the Housing Act of 1937, I didn't see anything on there that said Black people. I didn't see anything on there that said white people. So the point that I'm making here is that, one, let's not look at things all the time through a racial lens. Let's just keep that in the back of the mind. And two, when it comes to us as men and women, realize how we got here. It's not just the man's fault, and it's not just the women's fault. I showed you data that proves that men are not as bad as the world says that we are. I'm going to show you something else, because I cannot leave you guys tonight without showing you this. Whoops. Because if I'm going to show you one, I got to show you the other. Tell me, what do you see? Married couple households with children of household under 18. Total 61,421,188. Now, Male household, no spouse, with children under 18, 1,577,000. I understand that's a gross difference between 6,258,000. But the point that I am making here is that men are included in this struggle too. It's not just y'all, ladies. So the point that I'm making here is that men are doing the work too. And if you have a man that is trying to do the work and trying to either improve himself or, for that matter, is doing what he can with what he has, work with that man. Because the data shows that men have progressively gotten better. And I'm not telling the story. The CDC is telling the story. Yes, Milani, it would require deep inner work. But it'll also require you to remove cognitive dissonance. Because right now, under the sound of my voice, and whoever will watch this later, you won't believe what I tell you. You will think that, didn't they say that men always leave their children and men just get women pregnant and leave? Yes, that's what they'll tell you, especially black men. Yes, that's exactly what they'll tell you. But one more time for the people in the back. One more time, just in case. Because I don't think I can show this enough. Let's find it. Here we go. This is a stat from black families with female household with no spouse. So what we're looking for is for this number to start off high and decrease. 1959, and we're scrolling. The numbers start at 70.6. Going to 2001, 37.4%. Black men are getting better, ladies. (2002), we went up a little bit. We went up a little bit. We got better in 2009. We went up a little bit. But look at there. So from 37% in 2001, look at here, 27% just last year. That's rivaling the numbers of a black alone in combination. That's rivaling numbers of Hispanic people, but I mean white non-Hispanic rather. But white people, 19.9%. 2003, they're at 16.9%. And no one is trying to help men out. They do it alone. Well, the ones that have the gumption to be able to do it, they will. But the ones that don't, fuck them. Why? The reason why I say why fuck them, because there are men out here who just don't want to do better. And those men, I can't speak for. You're looking at a man who waited to have his own child when he got married. It wasn't something that was religious. It's just something that made sense to me. And yes, I had sex. I had girlfriends. I did some uncouth stuff. Sure did. Did I have any children? No. Do it responsibly, fellas. Maybe you should understand how your anatomy works before you start relying on uncouth methods. I'll leave it at that. So, with that in mind, we started off with accountability, and here we're starting off with some acceptance, and getting you guys to understand and see a different perspective that doesn't involve race, doesn't involve pointing the fingers, even though I baited this and saying you're the reason we're here, but maybe we are the reason why we're here. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? We're going to continue pointing the fingers, or are we going to actually look at each other and not see each other as enemies, as men and women, regardless of skin tone? All right. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and listening to me ramble on about data, ramble on about problems in society. I hope I offered a solution. If I didn't offer a solution, then here is one. Take a look inward. Look around. Be aware of what's going on around you. And if you are not taking self accountability, if you're not self-reflecting to see what you can do different to ensure that the social engineering around you is not tainting your own view on yourself, your own view of your perspective of somebody else, then you're part of the problem. Fix it. Fix it so that way we don't have another generation that's perpetuating the numbers that we have seen. If you are keeping your baby's father away from your children, away from his children, and if it's not for a legal reason and for the safety of the child, then you're part of the problem. Men, if you are continuing this cycle of staying away from the children because you think that the government has the better way or the better means of taking care of your children, you are perpetuating the problem. If you're not resolute enough to be able to interact with the mother of your children, you're part of the problem. Ladies, if you are unable to co-parent in a reasonable fashion like an adult, you're part of the problem. If you're having children and you can't afford the children and you are constantly remaining in the situation that you're in because it's easier to rely on the government to be able to fund your lifestyle, and you're not doing anything better to better yourself, to get out of the situation, to remove yourself from the welfare state, and therefore teaching your children how to maintain the lifestyle inside of the welfare state, you're part of the problem. You're not looking inward. You're perpetuating and promoting and promulgating the problem. We want to change and get away from this and not repeat the history, because people who don't know the history, you're doomed to repeat it. But what I will say is that irrespective to what's going on socially, if you're looking at another man and because they are a man, or if you're looking at a woman and because they are a woman, and you see them as an enemy just because they are a woman or a man, then you are missing crucial self-reflection. You're missing crucial accountability. You are part of the problem. And before you engage with anybody, you first need to understand why you look and see the opposite sex as an enemy. Otherwise, you're going to create battle and war babies. for the next generation. There's a solution. All right. So with all of that, I appreciate everyone for coming by. Make sure you come by and support the channel. All right. Tomorrow is barbershop. Friday is barbershop with BMU and Lost in Translation and the other fellas and of the BMU network. We have something for you every day that ends in YRW. Okay. You put that together. Okay. All days end in YNW. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, like I always tell everybody, think a little bit deeper, think critically, think objectively, and whatever you feel, don't feel. Whatever you think and whatever you come up with after you have thought objectively and critically, stay on that shit. All right. Good night.
It's going down like a rodeo. It's going down like I told you so. It's going down like a rodeo. It's going down like I told you so. I hope you're all here for the ride. Come inside, cause it's going down tonight. Only here for one night, no lies. Come and saddle up a ride. Need a yeehaw, you know how here for one night and we just wanna party. In a fast car, a Ferrari. It's a push start, I don't need a car key. It's out on Broadway, and it's gnarly. On a late night, but I'm not tardy. Right on time for the parties and Barbies. Strolling with a chunk of green like a golf swing. Hey, 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 hey. Bottles on ice, mess around these skates. Hey, hey, hey. If I gotta say it twice, then I got nothing to say. It's going down like a rodeo. It's going down like I told you so. It's going down like a rodeo. It's going down like I told you so. I hope you're all here for the ride. Come inside, cause it's going down tonight. Only here for one night, no lies. Come and saddle up a ride. Come and kiss me up, it's going down. Like a train with no brakes, I'm not slowing down. See it showing up, we're showing out. But I pack it